Dr. Lisa here for another episode of Owning Her Health. This is episode 70. Wow. So, 70 since the end of 2016. I can tell you that I haven't been on a weekly schedule. I want to talk about that self realization. So many people run from their feelings, they numb themselves because it is scary and it is something that I don't think I had a grasp of until I went into my own spiritual work. There comes a place of personal development where you're just done and you are starting to really seek more out of that. And um, that's what we're going to be talking about. There's a jump there, there's a big leap there between personal development and spiritual development. So listen in because we're going to start a three-part series, I think, on this. I think it'll be three parts, just short little chats on the lead up and because a lot of you guys are going to be going through this if you have not been going through it already. A lot of people that follow me because they hear the spirituality, the spiritual journey, and the connecting the dots between the tangible real life that we've created as our quote unquote real life and the intangible that we really feel is real, but it doesn't have a shape and a form yet. And it's in that unknown and where those things fuse. So,
welcome to this episode of Owning Her Health with your host, Dr. Lisa Holland. Join Lisa as she starts the conversation on what it really takes to become a healthy, wealthy, and whole CEO of your life. Listen in to real talk by real lady leaders in all walks of life as they open up on personal health stories, wealth, career, and feminine abundant living. Learn how to grow by owning your body, expanding your mind, and aligning your soul with the purpose only you can pursue in this world. Happiness begins with owning her health right now.
So, this is a complex conversation that I'm going to have with you. I'm going to put on my crown because I would say Lisette Alvarez Holland, the label of the woman I am today, is probably, from what I see in like the academic side of women's health of global women's health conversations and the whole like pelvic health conversation. Um, Maybe more just in general women's health. I think the pelvic health people are finally moving into the womb healing. But overall, I would say I'm one of the few, if the only, person speaking to the conversation of women's health at a quantum level in mainstream circles. So, what does that mean? What it means is that very early on, when I made Belly Guru, I realized there was a need for the type of yoga I had been studying in the world of women's health. And that was a Raja Hatha Bhakti mix that followed the structure of an Ashtanga path, was very much into the whole purpose was very much tied into that of like the Gnostic type of idea of of rising kundalini, of the kundalini, rising wisdom, like seeking wisdom. And to be perfectly honest, I was attracted to that because my personal development journey had always been very attached to space and horoscopes and astrology, and that, for whatever reason, because of the high spirituality in that and the tie in with the science and spirituality and the Egyptian culture and the mythologies, the archetypes, the understanding of human behavior as a condition of some sort of their formation. I always liked that in the Greek mythology, but if I had to say who had the science, and I became very enamored with the Egyptians and their system of mixing it all. And the closest thing I saw was honestly deep, higher Vedic wisdom seeking in yoga. The mind body connection I found very interesting from my father's bout of, I was witnessing it. I witnessed it, his chronic pain journey, and turned out it was PTSD feeding into that. So all of that, naturally I went into, life sciences and biology, but there was a limit in that, right? There was a limit in how much we could really reduce and get to the cellular level. I mean, if you want me to tell you what's happening down to the cellular metabolism, I can talk energy like that. But what I didn't understand and what I saw was an issue in women's health and healthcare in general was that it didn't make sense to me that there's more and more out there, right? There's life under the oceans we don't even know. There's life up in space. There's got to be. It's a very very self-centered, narcissistic, humanistic type of issue that we have, that we can look at all of the variants of things. We can keep discovering stuff in science and go out in space literally and still say, yeah, Earth is so random. Human beings, each one of us is just so random, and it's just this one big random thing. And be like 99% orangutan still. Right? Like it just doesn't make any sense, right? We're just trying to rationalize because what human beings have a condition is that we have an ego, which I love that I heard Dr. Wayne Dyer, the late Dr. Dyer, speak of is edging God out. I don't know if he made that up or not, but ever since I heard him say that, I said, yeah, that's exactly it. Because there is a human incapacity as we get smarter and smarter at the academic level and we start studying things in a wider and wider lens. For some reason, we get super scared at realizing we don't know anything. And I mean, I can't say for some reason, it's very scary. But once you realize that personal development and intellectual development don't really mean anything until you take that big leap and that big jump into spiritual development, which means you understand there's something that knows more than you, that there's an ultimate supreme intelligence from which all of this is making sense. You see enough patterns, right? Humans were made to understand patterns. That's how we're able to study any sort of scientific discovery. That's how we're supposed to be able to relate to one another. That is how we're supposed to be reading each other, right? You can understand that if we would just understand our makeup, how drastically detrimental it is that we are communicating with nonverbals, totally masked because we're just either audio or we're just talking on our phone versus talking in person. Like once we started using technology, it started making it easier and easier for us to lose that spirituality because there was no more, the wonder was being explained through academics. And yet, we can only discover what we can discover, right? Like we will never go beyond that limit of what we know if there's not a spiritual connect, if there's not an awness, a wonder still, if there's not a little bit of that childhood seeking, that there's got to be more, right? Like every child comes out with this space of like wanting to know more and learn more, or else they'd be laying there completely like an invalid, not reacting and moving to the world, because we are a sensory being that has a physical experience and a sensory experience, and that goes into our psyche. And that's why a, a disabled child that's born, let's say, just hearing impaired or visually impaired, without the proper support from therapies, without understanding this by their parents, may not be talked to, may not be shown things in a different way. And they then become mentally disabled, not because they were born with anything wrong with their brain. It's because they were born with something with their eyes or their optic nerve or their ears and their auditory, acoustic nerves or something. But because we're not right? Because before we understood that we are sensory beings, we used to just stick those children to go die somewhere. It's horrible, right? So I'm not anti-technology. I'm just saying, when once we made the answer through us, man, and we forgot that man only picks up from its own wonder, from its own imagination. Einstein had it right. This isn't the direct quote, but basically he's famous for saying a quote to the extent that as soon as you stop imagination, we're in a very sick world, right? Because you're going to start thinking it's you, and you're going to start not understanding that it's through you, that life comes through you. And so your attitude matters, and so how you treat others matters. Your mindset, your emotions, checking those, right? That energy and motion in you matters. Your belief systems are going to matter, not because they're the truth, but they're your truth, right? So, how does this go back to women's health, and why is this going to be this series? Well, obviously, this is a big topic, so I'm thinking three parts. I'm not going to get into too much more than that with this. I think it's an opening for you to join my Curvy Hustle Society, because I do give the advanced women's studies is an understanding of quantum reality and our ability to manifest our world but we have to understand it in ourselves. We have to understand the quantum physics in ourselves before we understand the outside quantum physics. We have to understand the quantumness within us, the greatness within us, without thinking we're a god, right? We need to study the spirituality. We need to study the personal development, um, before we worry about girl power. Honestly, like that's where we've gone off the rails with the feminism and all of that, and it's just that we're going to get into that. But I am going to do this in a three-part. This first part is obviously introducing it. The second part will get into navigating just the masculine and the feminine in a way that might feel less, um, less disrespectful to the whole different pronouns, different genders, different sexualities, different guys. When we're talking energies, when we're talking the way that there's just a way the universe is. Okay, so we'll talk about that in the second part, and in the third part, we're going to get into my own spiritual awakening, just as a process for what some of you guys might be going through, because it's scary at the quantum level. I'm not talking there. There's levels to it, which is what we'll discuss. But the women I'm calling in and I'm talking to are leaders on this front. And that's why you're probably listening to this. You might have an interest. You might have just kind of come on because you saw spirituality and women's health as the topic. But you're going to stay here, and you're going to definitely join my Curvy Hustle Society if this resonates with you. You're a leader. You've always been a leader, whether you wanted to or not. It might have just been on the academic level, but like you've gotten your accolades, you've got your things on the wall, but somehow you're not fulfilled. And I'm going to tell you something. It's because there's a calling in you that you are ignoring, or you're just not aware of it yet. There's a calling in you. And so that's what spiritual development allows you to do. It allows you to move beyond the worldly success, which we've all attained to some level. I have a very well educated audience. Um, you've done things a lot of your peers growing up didn't do. You might have a lifestyle that others are jealous of you of. Um, and if you're on a spiritual path, you got to be careful of that, because the enemy's real. and not everybody's happy for you. And you've got to really start learning at the higher levels. One of the things I've realized is it's been so torturous for me stepping into this space of spiritual development of women as the thread we are missing to weave together all of this personal development, this women's health advancements and awareness, this just human being, right? Mind, body, spirit, understanding, family wellness, power. This is the conversation around power. It's spirituality that needs to be the sutra, the yoga sutras, we call it, these things, these wisdoms that are woven into the practice. Well, we need the goddess wisdom sutras, okay? That's what I'm here for. And I've developed the Curvy Hustle Society to be a safe space for this, for high achieving. If I can get a woman when she's readily open to hearing something other than her own voice in her head, and she's not so exhausted because it's too far down the path of mothering or career seeking or relationships or whatever, that she's going to listen to a thing. I got to get her at that point, right? So I decided to, if mama's not happy, no one's happy. This is the same thing, except all women right now have to start putting on their motherhood gear because we're birthing a new freaking world, okay? There is a reason, whether or not you want to believe the religion. The story's been in other things too, but I'm going to speak as a woman who has studied her spirituality through starting to learn through Judaism, uh, looked at it through Christianity a lot, looked at it through Vedic wisdom, and seeing the overlap just in what I knew on science, and making sense of the nervous system and the fascia system and the integumentary system and circulatory system, and just the microcosm of what we have in our body is just, that's why I want to birth some of these women, some of these really spiritually open medicine women who are in mainstream like me, but are fusing in some of this spirituality, are fusing in some of this energy medicine, are fusing in some of this, quantum healing, intuitive wisdom, because they're the closest thing I've got in this lifetime, I think, to getting any of these books published or any of these things. I can't do it on my own. It's been hard enough for me to try to put it in a vehicle. I started it with yoga therapy. I moved it into functional medicine. And now I'm using it in business and entrepreneurship for power and leadership development and money making, because I realized my limit in not doing that. I realized how many women, hundreds and thousands of women, I had helped, who are now sitting there following somebody else's lead down the wrong path of spirituality. Right path for them where they are, but like I can see where the gaps are, where they were getting to a point of healing and whatever, and they're getting into the trauma conversation, they're getting into this, and they're listening to this podcast, and they're listening to reading Brene Brown books, but no one's tying it together, right? I had to go through my own spiritual awakening to realize no one's tying it together, Lise, because you've been sitting on your ass too scared to, preach it, to somehow, understand that your movement is a spiritual movement in the women's health and development and empowerment sector, you know. But the way I'm going to do that now, I'm turning 50 this year, is I've got to get the women who can get the most power, who can get the most money, and who are helping the core of the most families, the leaders inside the corporations and the schools and some of these churches, because they're whispering either in the pastor's ear, who is a male, or they are allowed to be pastoring themselves. This is the best way. I got to get into into healthcare, and academics will have to just follow eventually, because this will all be proven. People will hear it enough, they'll ridicule me enough. I went through this with yoga. yoga as a therapy. I got beat down by my peers, and now all of a sudden everybody wants to add a yoga class to get some cash, and they rationalize it. They understand the vagus nerve. They understand the parasympathetics. Everybody understands, trauma and all of this other stuff. And now it's brilliancy, right? Now it's brilliancy. It's going to be that way with this too. I understand that somebody's got to be crucified for it. I'm willing to take that on, but it's only because I'm going to midwife you. I'm going to midwife you listening to this to make you understand that if this is resonating with you, you need to do this. The time is now. Back when I was talking about this, the end of 2016, and I was going to want to highlight some women in the women's health world, it was just to get women's health conversations out of the vagina and the breasts, because I wanted to talk to people who kind of had a story that got them there. So you can see that it's a woman's pain that has birthed women's health. Okay, it's a woman's pain at a deep spiritual, mental, emotional, psychological level that has yielded the field of women's health. Okay, it hasn't been men suddenly waking up to the fact that they need us having good vaginas that are working well, and that we don't hate, and that we stopped having babies with them and stuff like that. That helped. That helped. Um, but it really was that. It was the call of a woman to another woman. It was being missed because we've lost our sister circles, that we need to be in circle because there's so much of this awareness of our bodies in order to go to the doctor and speak out and ask for what we need comes from our courage to be in our bodies as they're designed. And really, up until recently, in fact, I think it was during my tenure as a health provider, probably over the past 10, 15 years, is where I don't even know if my books in school were really showing the female anatomy to the extent that they are now. Like, it was there, but it was mainly always with a picture of a woman having a baby, and there was no like disease process pictures the way they were with like male bodies. So, you know, there's a need for this, but we have to understand ourselves before we keep yelling at somebody else not understanding us. And so I'm going to be a voice for this. It's a spiritual journey. It's a personal journey. It's a power journey. That's why it's a personal journey, because that's about power, right? Our identity, our form of expression, and our sense of purpose, where we stand in the world, our relevance to others. And if it's unhealthy, if our power is unhealthy, then we're going to feel a sense of needing to prove ourselves and have some sort of significance based on the outside forces on us instead of our inner force. So women in circle have a safe space to discuss this because it's a shared experience. And there's something about women who come in circle in faith. And that's really what spiritual development is. It's the deepest intimacy you can have with the self that is void of narcissistic tendencies, because you're actively working with the vision of self as a divinity. It's the most um, lack of edging God out work that you're attempting to do through the process of seeing a hell of a lot of ego in the process. It is a self-reflective journey that you're never going to be able to do through any of the work that's come from men, or the women who have struggled with their own femininity, which is encoded in women and repressed in men, but has become repressed in women too, and has had us get an affinity for the masculine power codes in us, and almost I know I had it. I was very anti things pink. I almost couldn't stand my femininity. Yet I used it through sex, money, and for power, which is why I say we're going to have to talk about that sexuality and money and finances and our financial power. And in this series, we're also going to talk about where those three come together: spirituality, spiritual power. And that's like energetic power, just, our understanding of our connection with source and that divinity and our intimacy with ourselves before we're worried about other people being intimate with us. Um, Relationship comes in that, right? Relationship comes in our own identity through personal power and spirituality. And I realized, my God, I've been talking about Mind Body Brand Academy, I've been talking about business and entrepreneurship, and it's financial power. That's relationship. Business is relationship. Business is also money, and money is energy exchange. It's a form of energy exchange, which brings it back into spirituality and personal power. See, all these three things, these are all things, and there's a goddess wisdom to it. There's not just a God-based wisdom to it. There's not just a look through the patriarchy, and there's not just a look through the matriarchy, which is why patriarchy and matriarchy are not really, we're beyond that. That's still very primal. That's still very primal. Because the modern day medicine woman that I'm speaking to, that's rising right now and needs a safe haven in the Curvy Hustle Society, to work on her business of being in the business of this, being in the business of helping other women's bodies, minds, souls, relationships, and leadership ability and power in the world through finances and energy, understanding energetic dynamics, relationships with people, and things like that. The reason that we need to really speak to this is because there's a radical shift right now. There is a portal that is open. There is a door that is opened, if you feel better in that conversation. It's a precious time. I know personally I felt it was coming. Something was coming. I know I was talking to my crew in Mind Body Brand Academy in 2019 that I don't know what's going to be going on next year, but the time is now to get their stuff together and to really think about who they want to be and in what community. And it's just full force now after 2020, 2021, and we're halfway through 2022 when I'm recording this. The time is now, ladies. The time is now. There's no more pussyfooting. And I'm saying pussyfooting because I understand that's the way we've been living, right? What's pussyfooting? Tiptoeing, being a girl. Maybe it's being a cat, being sly. Maybe it's being a lion, knowing you own the garden that we're creating. If you could just understand who you are and what you bring in the table just by your divine design. And I hope that we can do that, right? So, this is the introduction. It's going to be a 3-part series. This is part 1, the introduction. We're going to be going into the masculine feminine conversation, yin and yang. I'd love to hear back from you. I have a new Substack community. It's a news newsletter. I went into there to do my writing. It's the Curvy Hustler. Love notes. I give you a weekly update, but this is where we can have conversations on the podcast or some of the podcast talking episodes. I may run my own private podcast through that, the Evolving Human show I had in short spurts. I might bring that back just for that as a private community podcast. I haven't decided. I'm asking you, would you like the Evolving Human show? That's where we can get more of a man's point of view and a woman's point of view in conversation. That might be a place for the leadership and the relationship conversations outside of Owning Her Health, which focuses on people who have taken the pain and flipped it into a passion, a purpose, and a profit. So let me know. Is that an idea that would be something supportive of you? And if you'd like to dive in and get any of the treats from this show, if you'd like to join into any of the things, either the Curvy Hustler weekly newsletter on the weekends with those resources for entrepreneurs living this life, this complicated spiritual entrepreneur life. The thought leaders, the coaches and therapists, and the people who are seeing, whole women's health from a new point of view, holistic healing from a new point of view, that whole mind-body connection. All of you guys that you're basically artists. You're artists of the human mind, body, and soul, trying to bring this all together. If that's not for you, make sure you're listening in regularly to the Owning Her Health podcast and sending information directly back to me to support at drlisahollandpt.com, answering these questions, telling me what it is that you think you would like to discuss on future shows. All right, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Owning Her Health with Dr. Lisa Holland. To learn more about her personal and professional development service, visit her online at drlisahollandpt.com.